Welcome back to the game on Pax8 Live. We're already in December, and it's hard to fathom it. Anyways, this is the live show where we discuss all the cybersecurity shenanigans you need to be aware of for your day-to-day. We have a great conversation around security awareness training. We're bringing in another Pax8er today from Pax8 Academy. So with that, let's dive straight into the news.
All right, Dom, it is awesome. We're in the holiday season. You caught me all set up for my demo of clickjacking, where I'm taking over and using your mouse against you. But it's great to be here,
Hey,
man.
I use a wireless mouse, so I'm gonna have to be careful around you now.
You might not after watching this video, or at least make sure it's a modern one. Let's put it that way. So the 4-year-old.
So good.
Oh, you're good. You're great.
Oh,
Dom's
perfect,
always ahead of the security curve. So Forefront Dermatology settles a lawsuit in the news from a 2021 breach. So this is what I'm getting at of how these legal things are taking a while to play out in our industry, and how it's not often whatever you think is just behind you is behind you. They just settled a lawsuit from a 2021 breach for $3.75 million. And what was talked about in there is what I really want to focus on today, is really about training. And it's really about teaching people how to do the right thing and about setting up systems so that they do. But in this, they're alleged that they had over 100 login sets on the dark web, 100 that all had significant, quote, reuse. Dom, what are your thoughts on this one from a training perspective or from operations perspective? Like, I'd love to hear how your blood's boiling right now.
This one's rough. I think the first lesson is the legal system is still slow. So, to your point, it will stop being in the news cycle long before something like this happens. And this is no small amount of money, right? I don't know how big Forefront Dermatology is, but I don't think it matters. $3.75 million is a considerable fine to get over something so silly as not following basic security hygiene. To obviously, I would call this extreme. Hundreds, right, of credentials is a lot of credentials.
Front desk one with an exclamation point. So
that's pretty sharp.
They
pretty
did
smart.
make a complex password.
And you know what?
Yes.
You know what's scary is that's extremely common in medical, right? Oh, it's convenient because whoever's working the front desk, blah blah blah, and it's just not acceptable. So I don't know. There's probably a training gap here, but some practitioner within that organization somewhere allowed this to happen. Would be my first take of. I would have spotted front desk one exclamation point and been like, nah.
No, bro.
Right. Like, but these chickens will come home to roost if you're not doing your due diligence.
And you're starting to see increased scrutiny, right? And I think what's really, kind of talking about this one before we move on is that you've already seen the Department of Justice from October till now come down on a 801.71 in Rocket Jet Aerodyne. We've talked about that at length before. But what we haven't seen yet is this HIPAA sword that's kind of this specter out there right now, this Damocles sword of maybe they'll use this for HIPAA because reasonableness is easy to attack. Well, it sure as hell isn't reasonable to use a password 100 times. It's not. That you could define that very easily. I could easily get on stand and convince a juror or a set of jurors that that's a bad practice, documented everywhere, right? So I think the conversation is it's coming more to roost, but it's also just really beginning, in my opinion.
Right.
But to your point, there's certainly a training efficacy gap, and that's what I hope we're going to tackle with our special guest today. Is just because you've trained them, it doesn't mean they're going to do what you've asked them to do. You train that soldier to toss the grenade over the bunker before releasing it, right? And they sometimes still bang one around inside the dummy bunker, okay? So the point is you have this training efficacy problem. So let's go to the next story. Even our governments aren't free from this. And we actually have incident from Trend Micro and a couple other reporters in the last couple of days talking about Preta, or Preta, however you want to say it, spear-phishing governments worldwide. So this is another APT, or advanced persistent threat, so that I don't get called out for not defining my variables. But another advanced persistent threat group out there, known to be from China, in which they're doing some really interesting stuff. What's really neat about the way they've done this is they first, and I think this was actually in the Myanmar government that was being attacked at the time, but one of the first things they did was steal documents that were legitimately confidential and then use them as bait for people then seeking out these confidential documents within that government organization as a way to spread. And it's kind of insidious because there's a couple of training points that come to mind for me. Dom, any thoughts on where this applies to training or training efficacy challenges in the TTPs used, in the tactics, techniques, and practices? I apologize.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I got to say, I'm starting to be on your side with the whole naming is getting out of hand thing. I don't know who came up with Earth Preta, but that's not
Earth
a good
Preta,
one.
yeah, yeah.
So, but anyways,
Not as
looking
bad
at
as
this,
Teapot.
it
Yeah.
is not as bad as Teapot. Still takes the dumbest award. That was bad. But anyways, looking at this attack, it's extremely clever, right? It's the document that you're worried about. It's gonna entice you to click it. Um, so part of me says, well, this falls back on basic, like, hey, don't click weird attachments or links, but it's not that weird because it's a legitimate document, right? So this almost introduces a
Yeah.
new layer of um, understanding that things might look super legit, right? And this is a really good I would expect case study for trainers to use, right? And say, hey, this is an attack vector that's going to get exploited. Imagine in the private sector, if those were your diagrams for your new widget or whatever, right? Your IP, and you want to see what's leaked. Most people would
Yeah.
want to see what's leaked. Hell, the lawyer might want to see what's leaked, right? So there's a lot of potential here for training
Yeah.
as this is a new vector and you need to expand your don't open attachments bubble.
Yeah. Well, and this kind of does come into an excellent reaction tradecraft. If you look back at Kyle Hansloven, even a year, 3 years ago, I guess, with his initial hacking demo that they created in a can, in that case, they were saying, hey, if Danielle's job was to open runs of shows from people on something she's produced, it's a very high chance that that run of show is going to get opened when it's been sent to her. And in the same way, if you're in HR and your entire job is to answer resumes, you're probably going to answer my malicious resume if I can get it through your defensive systems, right? And so it is this
Right.
training of that last mile of this doesn't seem right, or maybe I should sandbox this. Is there a way I could test this before using it? Are those things? And those are the ways that, giving away a little of my trade craft, those are my last mile of something when I'm just not sure, or even when I have some instant little degree of believability that something could be malicious. I'm going to sandbox it. I'm going to look at it and see, which then the bad guys just go around with sandbox evasion methodologies. So unfortunately, it is a cat and mouse game. But I think to this point, when you're dealing with government entities, you certainly, and especially if you're dealing with hunting down classified information, one would hope and imagine that there's already systems built in for that type of process to exist where they're going to detonate these things in a meaningful fashion before just looking at the document coming from the wild. But
Well, it's
don't
going to
want to be
depend on the sophistication of that government's IC, right? Like a counterintelligence unit in the U.S. certainly is going to have, I would hope.
I would hope. Yeah.
But I'm pretty sure, based on people I know, that there are ways that this stuff is handled that prevent this sort of attack from being a realistic thing. But again, if we pull this back, get back in the private sector and back into people that aren't being targeted by nation states, the resume one's a great example. People send me resumes all the time. I won't open them. Tell them if you want the job, you got to apply, because the tool we use uploads it, puts it in a web-friendly format,
Yep.
and hypothetically takes care of these issues, or at least reduces the chances of that document being
I'd
malicious
agree with
when it
that
comes to
statement.
me. So it's also a procedural thing in this case of saying, I don't take your .doc resume in an email. You've got to put it in my application system so that the application system is handling that payload, right?
Yeah.
So it's definitely another good training mechanism, right?
Yeah.
I'm a fan of this one. It was really smart on the attacker's part.
I thought so too. Joking about what you said a minute ago around the .doc files, I'm just like paranoid that way, in the sense that whenever someone's wanting to send that, I was doing my ISC squared interview. They did an interview about my CCSP, and she sends it to me in a Word doc, and I'm like, hey, don't want to be a pill, but do you mind turning this into a PDF and sending it to
Right.
me in a PDF? I have better chances of protecting myself in that PDF document. And she's like, I guess I wouldn't have expected no less as a security professional. I said, fair. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Well, and
But it
if
was
it's a
funny.
doc and not a docx, right, something is
Yeah.
immediately wrong, right?
Yeah.
Something is that, I mean, the practices of whoever you're working with are either ridiculously out of date or that document is malicious. Those are the only two outcomes, because Word hasn't had a doc file for 13, 15 years now. I think
Yeah.
2007, right? DocX. So also be on the lookout for those little things. If you're not
The
getting,
auditor's here,
I
Dom.
got a
Hide your
guess.
screen. Hide your
Uh-oh.
screen. Auditor's checking in.
Um, if I'm not getting the output I'm expecting right, in the form of the proper document format, I'm not even starting with that. Even if you sent me a doc file, I certainly wouldn't open it.
If I sent you a doc file, you'd probably have to ask a question of what I'm doing there for sure. That's definitely the case. All right, let's move on. We've got one last piece of news, and I want to end with a good news. Like, this is always great when we get to see good news is in this case, but this one comes down from indictments that are coming from the Department of Justice around a business email compromise and health insurance program scams that was kind of uncovered. There were 10, I think, indictees, of which the grand majority were in the United States. And so it does seem that the Maine Attorney General reduced the breach numbers to thousands. But the point being, it's a very good time when you start seeing these things come back. The incident is the 5th largest healthcare data breach reported last year that was purported to be part of this endeavor that the lawsuit stemmed from the Cuba group. Posted things stolen from Forefront Health, I think is the name of the company. But the point is, they got some people. People were dumb enough to do it in the jurisdiction of the federal authorities, and that always feels nice. But anyways, thoughts on training from this perspective? There's really not much. It's just huzzah.
It's good news. It's a win. But it's also, I mean, we had to play the training angle. BECs are a real thing. BECs are still super common and result in low-hanging fruit for attacks.
And what is a BEC, since we have to make sure and tap it before we use it?
Email compromise, right? So long story short, I get into Matt's account, right? And I email one of Matt's trusted contacts and say, hey, instead of wiring the money here, wire the money there. This is the most common. And the cool thing about it is you've now committed wire fraud. So it becomes a very, very chargeable offense. Right. Yep. Yeah. But essentially, you're trying to trick someone into doing something. There's been a lot of cases of like people trying to go after their banks, quite unsuccessfully, I might add, for letting these transfers happen that they authorized because the credentials were used, right? Or that they changed the instruction. So BEC is a tough one, and you want to be on the lookout for that and have procedures and train your people on said procedures, especially when it comes to money and wires and ACH and hell, someday somebody's going to do it mailing a check because the wire thing stops working, right? So pay attention to these things.
Well, I wanted to share this because I've got a Beardy Award being made for the Pax8 Studios team. This is for my beard shave, so I figured I'd do this live. But I have one of these with y'all's name on it, quite literally coming from the person making them. But that was for being such an awesome part of my beard shaving charity that we raised $202,667 at by shaving this stupid beard off for charity. So you get to see my fat chubby cheeks and my fat chin for a little while, but I'm at least still smiling, and I just wanted to thank y'all for being a part of that and helping us legitimize it in that growth moment towards the end by having such great graphics and great videos and all that. So my heart goes out to all of y'all. But I think we have, on that note, a video recap of said event that will probably make me cry, so I'm going to accidentally walk out of the room during this 3 minutes. But let's go for it. Thanks. I think Jay may be ready for us. Jay, you about ready for a butt in the seat?
Let's do it, man. All right, let's do it.
Just chaos, I guess is the best way to describe it. It was mission-focused chaos that then culminated in this one moment where all of that protection from my brain.
The steams open up the pores, so it's easier for the blade to glide.
Of knowing I was going to lose what is very definable as kind of me.
Will you be missing your beard?
That's a terrible question, Ann. I thought we were friends.
For me, it's the charities and what good we can do. So if you look at that 200,000, I think when we got done with the count, we had the initial 5 charities that were given 20,000 to, and then we added another 13 charities on top of that, or 15 charities on top of that.
$170,000 has been raised so far. No, but my beard is a greedy one. My beard wants more.
And so empirically, by going from 100,000 where I was going to impact 5 charities, mostly focused in cybersecurity, and now I've expanded that to letting those people that had that one-to-one sacrifice that I just talked about of shaving their beard and their identity, their part of their life to varying degrees.
Godspeed to your beard.
Each got to have some immediate impact to some charity that lets them feel like that's their legacy in that impact.
Shave that beard! Shave that beard! Shave that beard!
I feel like we're going to need some sort of therapist for Matt when he's done here.
And all of that going away hit me in just a minute. I mean, it genuinely was just protection from that because it's so chaotic you can't think about it, to you're sitting in a chair.
My show, but
This is one of the most surreal moments of my life.
yeah.
But as I sat there in the chair, it was kind of that realization this was all happening and that I was now having to deal with my own part of it, the sacrifice piece of it.
First one to sweat on the stage today.
And then as I kind of turned around and saw the audience, it was just, I mean, I cried a lot. And it was kind of really tough and overwhelming. And there's even a point where I said, this is what the channel does. And, you know, people that know me were able to see how broken I was, right, about this.
You want to see it? I can't hear you.
I do a lot of cybersecurity things. I've been involved in a lot of subject matter expertise and risen to a top level in my career. And I've never seen the admiration look that my wife has given me in the last few days that I've seen recently. So that was a really cool, unexpected consequence of this, is that she's extremely proud of me in a way that I couldn't have translated in professional success.
So I've done my duty. I've gotten rid of my beard. Everybody can feel grateful about that.
You know, our only goal is to give more than we take. So I got to. It was really cool.
Oh, here comes Vince.
Hey.
That's your face.
Holy heck, who is that person?
He's asleep. Look at him. He's sleeping like a little baby.
This is your face. Oh, shit.
There it is.
Hey. Oh, my
It's going to be fantastic.
Oh, my God.
At the end of the day, we did something special here. Love you, bro.
Love you too, man.
That was a cool experience for sure.
It was wild.
You
On a
I don't
humorous
take
note,
credit for
though.
that, but- Yeah, go ahead.
On a humorous note, I think Cole Hoblin was my second favorite, because that poor dude came out looking about 16. I was like, man,
Yeah, he did.
he's gonna get carded everywhere. That man's gonna
The
get
good
carded
news
by
is,
a
though, I
bag of
think he
chips.
grew that beard. I think he grew that beard in like 4 months. So I'm not sure how that's
Oh,
even possible.
He'll
But
be fine.
I remember it just appearing all of a sudden somehow in the middle of meetings. But
That's fair.
yeah,
That's fair.
anyway.
I do remember that.
no, it was cool. Actually, as the numbers finally shook out, we were able to do the original 5 charities at 20,000, and then we added, I think it was 16 additional charities, and then we also funded the credit card transactions at GoFundMe for what would have equated to one more charity. But we were able to give 16 charities $5,000, and then the 5 charities the $20,000 each. So it was really epic. Still in the points of
Huge
getting that all
impact.
distributed. But it is a blast. Yeah, it was awesome. I will never shave my beard again. That is a statement I will make for the finality of my life. However, it was worth it. So training. And one of the challenges that we're trying to tackle here is, as we kind of go down this set of, the controls and in CIS, these macro level controls, is one of them is control 14. And if we'll pull up that first image of it, I kind of want to introduce control 14 and some of the subcomponents, and we'll kind of talk about it just a little bit. So control 14 is really saying, hey, as a good idea, you might want to train your people, right? Establish and maintain a security awareness program. But they break into that additionally and say, have a program and make sure that it actually does several of these things at a minimum, right? Train annually, train when you hire, about how to handle your assets and data in a secure manner. It also goes on to say, hey, listen, we need to train workforce members on social engineering attacks and authentication best practices. We've just seen 2 failures of those right now. Data handling best practices, a tertiary failure of same on both regards, right, in the news. So what are your thoughts? I mean, do you think MSPs get it right today, Dom? I kind of want to just touch on
You're
that
gonna make
first
me answer
question.
this question. I see.
I am. I'm a terrible human.
No.
Yes.
No, we don't get it
Okay.
right. And I
We
don't
do
think
not.
I don't think it's our fault. I don't. We were never taught, right? I didn't know until I really, like you and I, started working together and really dove into what is SAT, right? But
True.
no, it's we're off, right? But what I'm really curious about is to see how this evolves. Pass keys are coming to fruition and starting to exist and things like that. CIS,
Yep.
8.5 or whatever. Do we now need to
Fair,
start
fair.
teaching people FIDO and passkeys and CertAuth and phishing resistant authentication and those kind of things? But no,
Right.
we have a long way to go, I think.
Yeah. One of the things that I'd add to that is that when we have done it, so I started doing a security awareness training. We used Know before many moons ago, right? We've used Breach Secure now for various functions, all of those things. But when you read the actual control, when you read Control 14, I think we're still failing. I think we're kind of touching on social engineering as a effort of training. I think we're kind of touching on password management and authentication best practices as an effort of training. But I don't know that anybody is actually being trained with any efficacy as an outcome.
No.
I don't think they're doing it, right? It's thanks for the check. I understand what not to do, but my hand hadn't burned, so I'm gonna keep touching the stove, right?
But I'll
the first
say
time
too, like,
go ahead.
it's not easy, but at the risk of throwing the wrong people under the bus, one of the most viral posts on LinkedIn I made this year was I got phished, which is hilarious and fair.
I
But
remember
I got
that.
phished
Yeah.
by a sample or a test here internally. I was like, oh man, I got to do this silly training. I got the training. Now, mind you, I had clicked a phishing link in an email. So one would assume that it'd be like, hey, here's some tips to recognize.
That's one. I take
No.
that as 1 point, Matt, in the point system, not for any other reason, but the deductive point you just took. Does that make
fair.
sense? Like it's a
Good enough.
Okay, fair.
I like it.
Yeah.
But so the training I got was like, here's what fake browser pop-up update scams look like. And I was like, what does this have to do with what I just did or the security risk I just created by clicking that email? And it's little things like that where the core of the product is okay, right? But you've now given me a completely irrelevant training. I learned nothing about why I shouldn't have clicked a link and said email.
It wasn't
It's
contextual,
those
right?
little things that need fixed, right? You have to contextualize it to what's happening in your environment after you cover the basics. I kind of evolved into lunch and learns or coming into a customer's office and talking with them in person, right? And bringing real world attacks and saying, this is what we're seeing. And then moving on to, the canned video content or whatever. But that was just a good example of, I felt that training that I got was completely useless. Like, sure, it's good for me and my users to know about fake browser updates, but it had nothing to do with the attack I just, pretend fell victim to.
Yeah. And I think the other part of this is when you talk about why would you deliver some training that's meaningful and contextual to what you failed, you're kind of getting into how people learn lessons. I didn't want to shoot from the hip on this. I'm not an expert in this matter, but I do have one that played one on TV last week with us here today. No, I'm just kidding. I have Bessie Nolan here with us from our Academy team. And Bessie has been a big part of my life over the last year. I teach a course, Dom, that you got to witness when it sucked, called Security Foundations. And in this course, I took it and took a lot of teachers' liberty and did things in a way that didn't make sense. I just read and talked and said stuff to people and thought, hey, I'm teaching, right? And the challenge was as people walked away from the first 2 iterations of that class, which I would apologize to the people in the first 2 iterations of that class. I still love you. You have coins for it, but I'm sorry you were watching me learn to teach. But in that time, I didn't really get any education across. And Bessie came in, helped me rebrand the class and also refocus the way we did the class, and set better expectations for the people coming in, and also set better expectations in the way that I would help people learn and what was effective at learning. So Bessie, do you mind, other than the introduction of me saying you're my hero, kind of share who you are and what your role is here at Academy?
Matt, you're too kind. So my name is Bessie Nolan. My title is Partner Educator with Academy. So I focus on driving the success of our instructor-led courses. So my background is in education. I have a master's degree in higher education. So working with college students and faculty on how to improve their curriculum and how to have more career development infused. That's kind of my background. At Pax8, I get to work with our amazing subject matter experts and teaching them how to teach, how to class. They have all this content knowledge, and we work together to create really engaging and effective courses to and how that we work together and how they can make it engaging and how we can make it fun too. So that's a little bit about what I do at Pax8.
So on that same note, talk to me about the journey you and I just went through. And this has actually been refined each time, hasn't it? I think we've done 3 new sessions with the new courseware, and I've learned, you've learned, we've learned new things each time. But talk about that journey a little bit of us rewriting, and then maybe expand that into the rest of the academy training where people aren't maybe as awesome like Dom per se, maybe in his work with you. But no, I just teasing.
Yeah, so we were able to sit down quite a while ago. I think it was actually in June or something when we first met, and we were able to talk about what is security foundations. Like, I was like, what does that mean? What do you actually cover in the course? Who is the course actually for? That's like a really important part of a course, is knowing who your audience is. At Academy, our motto is, our mission is meet every partner where they are with what they want to learn, how they want to learn it. But we can't do that if we don't know who the partner is and what they need to learn. So we really sat down and talked, who is this class for? And I thought this was a really technical course. I was like, okay, I'm not going to know anything he's talking about. But we were able to talk and know that this is a course that everyone should take. Every MSP should learn these basics of have a framework, and how important it is to have a framework to know what should I do first, second, third to improve my security knowledge. Uh, and so we were able to work together and say, okay, what should I do? We should make it organized. First step. I think you had it organized in a
Which is
different
not
way
my
before.
favorite thing. I literally put 1 through 18 in 3, 5, 6 plus 2, 4, not like just the dumbest thing in the world. Like, I'm an idiot, just straight up telling the truth here. Yeah, I was like that's what I meant by taking teachers' creative liberty, if you will. Yeah, it was not.
Yeah, and you're telling me who is it? It's Phyllis, or who wrote CIS
Phyllis
controls?
Lee. Yeah, the VP of our senior
Yeah,
vice president of controls. Yeah.
yeah, she wrote them so that it was going to be in the specific order for a specific reason. I was like, well,
Why are we
keep
bringing
it
up
that
old
way.
stuff, Bessie? Why are we bringing up old stuff?
Okay,
Like,
okay.
we've already,
Let's
we've
move
already
forward.
asked
Move forward. So the biggest changes that we made to the course, the first thing was we changed the name. Security Foundations didn't tell us what it was. We changed it to Applying CIS Controls. And the goal of that is to be action oriented, so that it's not just partners need to know what the controls are, they need to know how to apply them and what to do with that knowledge, so that they can improve their business and they can improve their clients' businesses as well. And you really
So,
mentioned this at the top of it. It's an iterative process. We didn't just like, okay, we made the changes. We, have made it. We have an activity for each control, and now we're done. And now you don't have to change it again. We've
yeah.
changed it, as you said, every time. And if there's a class that's just more advanced, we make sure that we edit the activity so that it meets them where they're at and makes it more advanced for them.
So
And
I have a
so
guiding
it's been a lot
question
of
for
fun.
you then. The
Yeah.
intention of this kind of episode of the game is to play this game.
Mhm.
You see what I did there? I don't know
Yeah.
if Patton did, but is to
Ah,
play this game of how would you, Bessie and Dom, try to meet training an MSP's clients, right? So I'd love to hear the two of you chat this out of Dom, your job is to kind of say what the clients are and what we're trying to train on. Our goal is to meet social engineering as well as password management and user account, right? Controls 14, 2, and 3. So how would you help Dom craft that as an MSP owner to be more effective? Let's talk about some of the concepts, scoping it right, naming it right, how you deliver it, kinetic. So touch that for me real quick and try to put what you just did with me in a lens for Dom, the
Mhm.
MSP owner.
Yeah, I mean, I think, Dom, you would want to make sure that number one thing with adult learning in general is make it relevant to the person you're talking to. So, if you're talking to someone that's not technical, that doesn't have a technical background, like, maybe don't go in super in depth about everything that happens on the back end, and like what's like, what are these scripts that might be changing, I don't even know. You want to make sure you're speaking their language, that you're making it relevant to them, giving them even examples from their own industry or their own life experiences, if you know them even that well. Make it super relevant to them so that they can understand. If it's going over their head, they're going to be like, oh yeah, that guy, IT guy, wants me to do something. Okay. you know, that's no offense. We want to make sure. that that it's super relevant to them. And I know, Matt, you do a few things when we're meeting that, you tell your life experiences and you tell your stories, and it really sticks with people. And they really appreciate, like, wow, you've had to go through some stuff. um and like, hopefully, like, none of the MSPs that we teach these classes to will have to go through it. But that sharing that experience, I think, really sticks with people. I know I'm kind of going a little bit off the organized list you had for me, but I'd say that's going to be the number one first thing, is make it relevant and make it engaging. Um, you also want to give them their experiences, that and tie it to what might actually happen to them. So I know, Dom, you were telling me, like, you got fished and then the
Right.
training didn't align.
Right.
Like, you
Yeah.
want it to be aligning. And I know for me too, that's like one of the things that happened to me too, where I got fished and I clicked on the link and I was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I fell for this. I now teach like a very introductory level class for MSPs called Building Your MSP. It's basically if you're starting from scratch or you're transitioning from break fix. We have a section on security, and I teach everyone the SLAM method. Look out for, what is it?
Mm.
I know, I'm getting quizzed on myself right now. Sender, links, attachments, and message. And I was like, I didn't even do
Yep.
that for myself. Like, what am I doing? And so I think having that follow-up of, okay, like, why did that one stick to me? And I was like, oh wow, it was about dress code. And thought that was so weird that Pax8 would have a dress code. I have never heard of this. And then I was like, afterwards, I was like, duh, that's why it got to me, because I thought that was really intriguing and weird. And instead of just waiting a second and remembering, if it's weird, don't click on it. I just went ahead and clicked. So I think having those like follow up, like sessions or discussions, or asking managers even to talk about, oh, I saw this happen. Like, let's talk through it. Why did this happen? How are you going to avoid it next time? That's really helpful to do too.
The other thing I'll butt in real quick, just when it comes to the phishing testing aspect too. A lot of administrators make the mistake, and MSPs, in my opinion, make the mistake of honing in on the negative of those that failed that test, right? And saying, oh, look at shame the failed people. And the reason I'd say that's bad is there's a concept of social proof. It's a British theory from the mid 80s, if I recall, that says, hey, listen, if you dropped a human that spoke a language of a people, but had none of the cultural immersion, had never experienced the culture and the things that were done there, and you drop them off in that space, very rapidly they would do the things that others are doing. And so if you apply that, it's because we work better on not being ostracized and being part of the good crowd and part of the ones that are actually correct. In fact, when you ostracize, you almost force more of behavior in the experience that you don't want. And so what this woman said during a TED talk was, the job is really to come in and say, oh my God, look at the 80%. I mean, you'd be talking about Matt Lee here too, that have never been fished, right? That have gotten through.
Right.
No, that wasn't a hard flex. I apologize. That was not intended.
Oh.
Yeah, but those people.
I see how it is.
Yeah. That was totally low key.
Hey,
But
my record's still
on the
pretty good.
positive,
Okay.
it is still 99-1 for sure.
Yeah.
But focusing on that 99 and not the 1. And I think that is the
on
point
phishing
of
testing
saying,
in particular, a lot of these products take phishing V1, the MVP of phishing, and just the super generic. Every other phishing test I've ever gotten was that. Like I 3 letters in, I was like, nope. Right. This one was really good because I was getting my benefits squared away. Got kids. You can
perfectly
hear
timed.
health insurance is important, right? It's about benefits. Got to do something. I had to do something. The benefits deadline, I think, is literally like just yesterday or last week or something. But anyways, like it was a sense of urgency at the top of my mind, right? And that's from that perspective too, around teaching people. That's the kind of phishing testing you should be doing, right? Send the one about benefits during open enrollment, or the dress code one, because we all know Pax8's dress code is not this codified thing, right? And those are really effective attacks, and that's what's coming at your users who understand what's going on. It's not hard to figure out that a company's in open enrollment. In fact, you could pepper that out in the month of December, because most companies do open enrollment in November, December, right?
Yep. Yeah. And as you think about that, what is that called? So, Bessie, are you familiar with that term? We just had it in the news. What is that technique when you're doing something specifically when you're phishing, as opposed to more of a broad spectrum phishing attack? I'll give you bonus points if you get it.
Oh my gosh, are you talking about social engineering? Or no, no,
You
you're
know what?
not.
I'll give you
uh,
5
It's a
points
form
for
of social
that.
engineering.
It's a form of social
oh gosh,
engineering.
spear-phishing? I don't know.
It is.
I don't
Bonus
know.
points for
Nailed
Woo!
it.
Bessie. Yeah, 100%. Yeah, the teacher has become the master, or the student has become the master. Yeah, spear phishing is what's happening there, right? When you're doing things that you know the user is more predicated to do because of it. It'd be like, Danielle happens to love Starbucks, so I'm going to send her 100 Starbucks coupons and hope that eventually she's like, money, 30% off on that pumpkin spice latte. And, that's the way it's supposed to be used, right? So that's why when we talk about training, we're trying to educate people on social engineering, which was kind of one of those things we talked about, and saying, maybe I shouldn't answer every single Facebook thing.
That's guest
Maybe
has
when
entered the chat.
Starbucks, yeah, guest chat. Maybe when we have
the puppers entered the chat.
Who did? You're distracting me on purpose.
The dog.
That's not nice.
I know. But
Oh, my dog.
Your dog came.
Oh man, I'm so sorry. I'm so slow. Duke, you can come back, buddy. No, Duke will come back. But Duke doesn't believe in spear phishing personally. So my dog, yeah, exactly, right? So don't post your names of your dog online like I may have just done. And if so, certainly don't use them in the secret answers of questions online. But, back to Bessie on this conversion of the academy class. As we kind of wrapped it up, the exit scores have been really good. They're where we want them to be. People have been buying again. People have been coming back and having more people come through it. And so the efficacy is higher. Some of the other things we changed was more kinesthetic and more actually learning with your hands and learning by doing, which is how I learn. I don't know why I'm not smart enough to have realized that I can't teach different than the way that I also learn necessarily and have that be effective for those other people. But what are some of the examples of the things we did that changed that, and how could an MSP do that when training their partners, right? And then we'll kind of kick it around to Dom and I have a chat as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think you really touched on it already, which is making it engaging, giving opportunities to do it yourself or to talk through different scenarios. Just
Yeah.
talking at people and telling them, "Hey, this is what you need to do," like doesn't work as well as like talking with them, asking them open-ended questions, having a whole discussion around things. That's really important. I think you also made a really cool visual, and I don't want to just say don't use PowerPoint, but if you're going to use a PowerPoint, make sure you have visuals that really help people see what's going on. You have a whole chart that tells them if it's right of boom, left of boom, what kind of is it a device, is it a network, and you have these little markings to help people know like where are they in this process, and they can visually see it, and that helps the visual learners too. And so that was one thing we did. We also added in different activities. So we had people, for this control, we have a Miro board. It's an interactive tool that they can use to drag and say, I think this is going to be the most expensive but most effective, or this is going to be the least effective, least expensive, something like that. They can help decide, and it starts a really good discussion on like, why do you think that way? It's not that it's wrong. Why do you think that way? Or what's worked for you in the past, and kind of go through and do those
You're
of
right.
activities to make
In that exercise,
Yeah.
we've had, and I kind of invented these just trying to figure out how to do this more involved, right? And it was actually around
Mhm.
Control 14, Dom. And what we did was we put tons of little sticky notes that I had pre-written things on. And those pre-written things were like direct executive at training for specialties. One of the controls in 14 says you got to train an accountant one thing, and you got to train somebody that's in the operations side a different, right? And so we did like a little drag it on how effective versus how much cost is it. Now, in my own stupidity, I went opposite of Gartner. I wanted top left to be the best. It still screws me up every time I try it. So I'm going to be changing it back to top right being the best, just to stop fighting upstream from Gartner. But the point is that we made them put it on that graph and then defend their position if they placed it, and then ask why. And so it was really a great exercise. And each group has done it differently, to your point, Bessie, based on their own experiences and where in their mind they've convinced themselves of something. And so that just dawned on me right now how much more effective doing it that way is, because you force them to show that hand a little bit. That's awesome.
Yeah,
Interested to
forceful
see too if you
interaction and
researched it. Sorry, I would say you should repeat
No,
that
no, go.
exercise when the class is done and see what changed.
Ooh. Very interesting. And I might
We
try
had
to
Maybe
time.
even like a month down the road. Yeah.
Yeah, if we have time, right, Betsy? Like I've run
we
out
have
of time
time,
every
yeah.
single time. 8 hours is not enough. I can be a bit loquacious.
Yeah,
I
and I
suppose.
think those kind of activities and discussions also help build a community. And you're all then on the same team. You're all trying to, be even more defensible, avoid attackers, all these things that you're really building this community of we're all in this together. We all come from these different life experiences and we can do a lot of good by sharing our ideas and our expertise. So I think that's like another really positive thing that comes out of those exercises and those discussions. And a lot of our partners are like, can we get this class together again in 6 months and see how we're doing? And I'm like, I want every class to like get back together and to stay connected because sometimes you feel like you're alone as an MSP. You're the only one fighting all this stuff, and so you have a class that's like we're all gone through it together. We're all gonna keep working at this. Like, can we stay connected? And I really like that too. Yeah, and
That's
I
a very
think
positive. That's a very positive statement, right? And what I mean by that is like we're talking about how could someone take this as an MSP watching this right now and bring it in the lens of developing a training program for their customers. And I think that's it. This comes back from Chris Voss, right? Talking about trying to negotiate. You should sit on the same side of the table. If you're in a negotiation, you shouldn't be adversarial. It should be trying to accomplish the same goal, right? And so I think the point is when we start bringing this down to training for the end client, for the end producer that works for a Pax8, or for the end MSP's customer that they're working with, you have to bring it down to be effective, but to bring them in and make them part of this defense. All too often we're like, users are the biggest risk. They're the worst in the world. They have to be the biggest asset. They have to be part of the team, and we have to bring them in. And that brings me to one of my, kind of good questions I wanted to ask you, which is, what are your thoughts about tabletop exercises? You've heard me talk about them. You understand, at least conceptually, what a tabletop is. And maybe, Dom, for the audience, why don't you describe what a tabletop exercise is in general for people?
Yeah, so it's also called a war game if you're from sort of the military space. It's basically playing out exactly what you think is going to happen and then trying to trying to understand what's really going to happen in that scenario. So it's something I always recommend you put particularly like a newer person in the cyberspace through. Just kind of make them sweat, right? You kind of get the opportunity to be like, cool, bust out the IR plan. Nope, that person's sick or whatever. And you start to get to stress them and make them feel. And then when the real situation happens, ideally it's somewhat muscle memory at that point. You're just kind of running through things. That's the hope of a tabletop, but you have to do them often and anytime you tweak.
So, Bessie, what are your thoughts on tabletop exercises in general being used for training methodologies and teaching?
I know, tabletop exercises, they sound like they might take a lot of work, a lot of prep work. It's a lot of time and energy going into it. But from my perspective, from the educational side of things, this is one of the best exercises that you can do. And there's a few reasons for that. One is that it's experiential learning. You're learning under stress. You're learning, in a it's not nothing actually is getting attacked on you right now, but you're able to like it's as a demo. It's like this is what could happen. You're learning as you're doing. It's like a college student. Like you learn a lot in the classroom, but sometimes you learn even more on an internship. When you're going through and you're seeing like this is how I apply, this is what might happen in the real world. Similar to that. Sees how you can see how it would affect them and what they would do. They have to make decisions. They have to be really engaged. You can't just sit in the back of the classroom with your, waiting for everyone else to solve the problems. You have to get up and do it. And I think that's really important. And so I think, I think that these kind of exercises are really important to do and are really helpful for people for learning. It sticks in your mind a lot when you're like, oh, when I did this, this happened, and
Yeah.
what didn't turn out so good. So I have to do something differently the next time, something like that.
And
So I would say,
it comes back to being a storyteller, right? Like when you think about this, what you're hoping to do is elicit emotion that is a simulation of experiencing what you would have experienced, right? And I bring it back to a story I tell a lot on stage. Me, Bessie, and Dom are standing at the top of a cliff, right? It's a very, very sharp cliff leading to a very craggly and ugly demise. And as we're standing there looking over the rail, I slowly reach up and push Dom to his demise. Is there any chance that if you're standing there, Bessie, you don't do one of a few things? Take a step back and get away from the cliff edge, take a defensive posture, take an advanced attacking posture, or run the hell down the hill. And if you take that further forward, if you went down that hill and ran into somebody coming up, Danielle's now coming up the hill about to go up and see the beautiful scenery, and said, hey, homie's pushing people off the cliff up there. Don't go up there. Is there any chance she doesn't believe you based on your experiential, passion that came out of this, right? It's pretty high chance she's going to believe you. I say all that to say, bringing people emotion, such as talking about pushing someone off a hill or having conversations to put them in that moment, allow you to break through this barrier of kind of Charlie Brown's mom, wah, 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 wah. And tabletop exercises are a great way to do that. I love making a customer understand, no, you do not have access to QuickBooks. By the way, here's 4 more calls about asking for this data for these checks. And by the way, there's 2 customers up front that can't check out. And by the way, you're also experiencing the fact that right now your best suppliers are calling saying they're getting hundreds of emails from you and you're getting pages every second. And simulating that and then walking through what you would do in that chaos helps uncover the gaps in your knowledge, because you now have this real framework of context to apply those experiences and feelings and data points to. Right. And so I love tabletop learning exercises. If I was doing them on the slider of that, cost versus impact, I think they have an extremely high impact. I think they have an equally high cost, in the sense that you have to either simulate in some way, take a lot of people from their job, get a bunch of people sitting down in the frame of mind to actually do it in a way that's meaningful for companies to get that. But I think it is the pinnacle of something you should have as a pro serve or as an engagement in your MSP with your customers, because you'll get stuff bought in of doing projects you've been putting behind that would enhance that experience, leaning into setting security policies and training and being better, setting more restrictive policies to help the humans. Us humans suck. We just are stupid, God bless us. And as a result, you have to somehow set the systems to not allow me to fail, to not allow me to reuse passwords in some way, to not allow me to do the things that are bad. And so there's a balance act to that. And I think tabletops cross both sides of that, the training and getting buy-in from executives to do things that you don't want to have to train every time. You just want to systemically limit, right? Why do people have a turnstile at highly restricted manufacturing facilities? Because they're tired of training people into where they should exit so they can be properly inspected on camera as well as on in-person human. So they just put in a turnstile. It's the only place you can come in and go. It controls that access point. And so in digital, we need to do some of those things too, to get off my soapbox. But
to add to
anyways,
that too, I think it's a great if you can pull off a tabletop for your customer, but it should be a non-negotiable in your MSP. Or if you're a security practitioner, you should be doing tabletops, because you will walk
100%.
into an incident with this big, packet of my incident response plan, and it will all go to shit immediately. That's just how the world works. That's just all
True
the best
story.
plans
Every
fall
time.
apart. Right? Otherwise, it wasn't a good plan. So it's
who was it? Mike
it's something
Tyson,
you
right?
have
Everybody
to-
got a plan until you get punched in the mouth, I think is a famous quote, right? So
especially by Mike Tyson. So it's, you should be tabletopping. You should be doing it at least once a year. You should be tabletopping with others in your area or who you have a partnership with, and make sure they're going to be able to help you. And then it's by far the most engaging way of training, because you can also have an external party look at your plan and introduce wrenches, right? Oh, you're going to do it this way. Well, the person that knows how to do that quit yesterday or whatever, right? You can start to invent these scenarios that make it harder. And you really do want your people to sweat. You want them to understand that this is not going to go how we've pictured it ever at any point in time. And that's okay. It's what we accept by being in this space, but you have to feel that, right? So I would say at least annually, you should be tabletopping internally with your MSP through cyber incidents, through continuity incidents, whatever your issue is or what you want to practice. Teach it theoretically, but teach it for real. And don't make it easy. I've witnessed tabletop exercises like, cool, step A, we're going to do this. Step B, we're going to do that. Great, restored, we're done. And that's just not how it's going to play out. Don't let yourself do that, right? Step B fell apart. What's step B? Step B's backup plan, right? Oh, we don't have one. Cool. Write in a contingency, figure it out. And the hope is, though, when you get into that and you start sweating for real, you're ready for it. You're like, oh, we thought this might happen. Let's pull out the backup plan, figure out how we can implement that or whatever. So please, tabletop, please do.
Yeah. And the reason you want to is it's a bit of an inoculation, right? In the sense that if I fall for a BEC and I get compromised in a business, email compromised, and I'm the accounts receivable person or accounts payable person, and I give up that data, and I'm the one that probably discovers that $500,000 is missing. I'm the one that probably takes on the shame of remembering that conversation. I'm the one that probably, and those are traumatic events. I've seen post-traumatic stress play out in organizations that have dealt with this. In some of our 67 or so incidents, we've had people that quit their job that said they were just so embarrassed they couldn't do it anymore, even though they were one of just yet another victim in that string. And so why do we tabletop? Is because if we can give them a dose of that feeling, if we can give them something that they can wash off in a few minutes that isn't real anymore, right? As opposed to this constant belief that maybe I'm not getting promoted because my accounting lead thinks I'm the idiot that cost us this major thing and nobody got their bonus last year. And maybe I've actually done, and so you've seen that play out so much so that the CEO of this company that lost $1.9 million, every time I see him, the first reaction is not a positive one. Even though we're good friends now, you can just see it in his face as he's absorbing this remembrance of how we know each other. I don't want to overplay the stress of it, but you carry a lot of guilt in that. It's almost similar to that. And if you can simulate it and get their buy-in, then you probably get that one person to go, hey, I'm not clicking on this. Now, to that same point, Bessie's watched the video. Bessie's gone to the training. You've watched the video. You've gone to the training. But it certainly becomes more palatably real once you've actually failed that training and that phishing test, and once you now look more suspiciously at it. So training's a tough one, right? Bessie, how, as it's kind of a final closeout, do you have tips or thoughts on how we can make sure it is efficacious, right? Like I said, how do we get people to actually take action on something they've learned? What are your tips there for MSPs when trying to teach their clients?
So I think the first you've already brought up is that you should be repetitive. It's not just a one and done training. There should be follow-ups. It should be, not just, okay, how was done. It should say, how was that for you? What are the steps you're going to take? What goals are you going to set? I think, in the class for applying CIS controls, we have partners fill out a POAM every control. What is my plan of action and milestones? How am I going to achieve this? I think
Even
similar
defined her
things would really
variable,
be-
y'all. We got to give her credit on
There you
that.
go.
That's an extra point for already playing ahead of the game and defining POAM for us. But yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think that could be done for clients too. Of I think especially when they know why it's important. It's not just, oh, I have to do this. How is this? This is going to make me more money if I do this. This is going to, manage my risk. This is, what are the things it's going to do to help their company and reach their goals. I think it's really important to, have that remembrance and have that be repetitive and have the discussion be continuing. Um, and also you mentioned this too, having this positive feedback loop, or if there's a way to incentivize doing these trainings, so even by just showing them, oh, by taking these actions you are um, reducing these attacks, or this something like that, telling them what are they getting out of doing this, what's happening because of it. And it can really bring that a positive association to doing these different trainings and what they're getting out of them. So I think it's really important to do that, and to rewarding them in some way, if it's socially rewarding them, I don't know, monetarily, some way, rewarding people for saying, you did this and you did a great job and you're going to keep being secure, be defensible, take these actions. That's going to make it sure that it sticks in their mind and they want to keep doing them. They know it's helping them. They're going to make an action step. It's going to be included in their career journey, no matter what they do. I think that makes an impact. So those are some things that I would do to make sure the material is learned. It's, keep going. I would say don't give up. just keep going through them and doing them again and again, and learning from each experience, knowing how this client learns best, and modifying as you go to meet their needs and meet them where they're at. Those are
Yeah.
some things that came to mind.
So, it kind of comes back to Rex Frank. He says, measure what you expect, right? What you expect out of it, and then modify afterwards. So, Dom, now that your
Mhm.
teacher, Bessie, has taught you how to teach, how would you accomplish going about teaching? How would you measure whether they have buy-in? What would you say is the buy-in statement? Can you think of any ways you might try to modify how we teach around passwords or around, social engineering? How would you go about it now if you were trying to build a program? Just putting the spot on you.
Yeah, I see how it is. Well, first you have to understand that
Oh, yeah.
customer, and this is where things get challenging in the paradigm of what is an MSP. We scale. This doesn't work quite as well. You can have your content, but you've got to apply it differently, probably. So first, understanding the customer, right? But as you're getting into your content and hopefully teaching them in their style and making them understand their potential loss, making users understand what their role is. Again, to your point, not as a risk, but as an asset, right? A little bit of both, but as an asset in their
True.
eyes. That's when I think you achieve buy-in is saying, hey, you're definitely a risk. I would still be transparent with users about that. Like, you're dangerous. It just is what it is. But this is fixable. This is sort of can reduce the amount of risk you create if you pay attention to me and we work together at this. And for me, I would really go into those exercises. And maybe it's not a full-blown tabletop. Maybe it's just a scenario where we make them think out that particular scenario. You get this email, you click the link, now you're unsure. Play out that scenario in your head. What's your next step? Those little interactions that don't have to be that full-blown tabletop, which will cost you a lot of money and time, I think can go a long way. And I always gauge buy-in
Almost to
just by,
choose
Makes
your
it
are you
own.
paying attention to me?
makes it really relevant to them when you do it like that, of saying, this is what could happen to me. It's like, you can, in my business, what would happen if XYZ occurred? Like, I can really,
Yeah.
it really helps that way. I know I saw a tweet the other day that was, my password when I was 17, it was dolphins are cool or something.
Oh
My
yeah,
password when I'm
yeah.
27, dolphins are cool too, exclamation mark. I think, how can,
Yeah. True
even
story.
showing something like that and being like, this is probably you. How do you fix this? What can you
Yeah.
do?
Yeah.
Telling a story around that, it makes a big difference. And I think you hit it exactly, Dom. Like, this happens to you. What do you do next? Having them engage, answer the questions. I think teacher Bessie says you did a great job.
Awesome.
Thanks.
Yeah. The funny part you added in is humor. I often love to incorporate humor, right? Like, funny pushing someone off of a cliff gives a bit of humor added to that as well, right? Like, unless you're just not as dark as me, in which case I'd
But
like
I
to
always
withdraw my
die in
statement.
that story, so it's not as funny for me.
Well, I usually don't like to kill our guests, Dom. I try to kill
That's
the
fair.
other
I
host,
guess
right?
that's fair.
It's just
Yeah,
the
I get it.
politeness thing. But the point is, adding in that humor with the tweet as part of a way you're teaching someone makes the levity there and makes them like you and makes it more engaging, right? And I think that's one of the other takeaways, that as you're doing teaching and trying to develop these, you would do that. And then specifically, the other piece I'd add is, when I went to this, Premier One is one of our partners. They're an MSP, and they are specifically in the title insurance industry. That's their vertical. And I went to speak to a group of about 100 of their title insurance, title delivery, title managers, title companies, all of that space. And we were talking, and it blew my mind how the verticalized training made that experience so much more valuable for those participants, not just in the cybersecurity part, but they learned about trends in the legal side of what they're doing. They learned about how this compromise actually led to a false seller, right? So a compromise of a realtor, a compromise of accounts and data about a false seller led to a chance where their cyber insurance didn't cover, and neither did their E&O, and neither did their business, because it was a legal matter of, they wired it to a legitimate company. That company just wasn't the company, right? And so you see all this where adding in relevant content, if you can bring that all the way down to when you're teaching AR clerks, you teach them an example about something that's relevant to their job, that they can picture themselves in that sports car, right? And even if it is about to go off the cliff. But what is it with me and cliffs? Like, I would avoid high spaces with me. Like, it's probably
Yeah,
a good
seriously.
and valid idea. But I think the point is, adding in relevant content really, really matters in teaching for efficacy, right? To make someone realize there's an attack vector here, is kind of what my teacher Bessie would have taught me to say. So, I think we've
And
had a great
title companies and real estate has got to be the number one for BEC and wire fraud. at least in the U.S.
They actually
I would
they
refuse to
mentioned
believe any different.
IC3. Yeah, they actually
Did
said
they?
to me, one of the
Wow.
participants goes, "Should I report this event to the IC3?" And I was like, "Hold on, let me breathe again
Wait.
from you
Yeah.
actually knowing the Internet Crime Consortium, right there, or the IC3, I think
Right.
is what it's called, right? And then secondary, for you actually being in a point where you're balancing, is this incident one that should be reportable or not? And that just makes my heart so very much warm than it would have been normally. So it was very, very cool experience. But I think, to back to the point earlier of, we're seeing everybody get better at this, and you should adapt what you're doing so that your clients find you valuable. That's the other side of this too. Anybody can go buy KnowBe4 and turn it on. How do you add other things that show you're actually trying to meet this training and reduce the number of incidents they deal with in that case? So,
You hit a point on
Bessie,
the
any
head in
final
the
thought? Or
last
go ahead,
couple
Dom.
minutes of the show is we're not telling you to get rid of your training platforms in any way. We're
Right.
telling you to continue to use the training platforms and then add a layer to it that's directly, because some of those, not all of them, I'll be honest, some of them are just a joke, but some of that content is actually super valuable, right? Now, I don't care about a lot of what I get from some of these platforms, but some of them it's like, oh, here's a new thing that we recently ran into on phishing. They're targeting benefits because it's open enrollment season. Those kind of things
Yep.
are extremely powerful. So we're not telling you to go get rid of all those products. We're telling you to sort of layer onto that and add a human touch to those products.
Yep.
So I feel like we never said that. Not telling you to cancel all the subscriptions, just make
Right.
them better, more efficacious.
And I would say, where you can, add your own video content, because if you're trying to build rapport and that community that Bessie spoke about earlier with your clients, you can't do it if somebody else is the face sitting there. And I think that's the point, is so many people are afraid to get in front of that camera and just put out content raw, be themselves, be human. It's endearing. Even if you're as ugly as me and have 3 chins, it's endearing when people bring you into something. Right. And so I think that's one of the points that we have to call out there too. Bessie, you get to close us out on any final thoughts on MSPs learning to teach. Just, you have the microphone, my friend.
I would just say that you can do it even if you have never taught a class before, and your first one might not be the best one ever, but you're going to learn a lot, and each one you're going to improve. So I would say, number 1, be relevant. Number 2, be engaging. So, connect with your clients, connect with each other, and everyone's going to be a lot better for it. So yeah, thanks for having me on, guys. I hope everyone's really successful in their cybersecurity awareness trainings that you end up doing.
Dom, close us out, buddy.
Okay. Well, thanks for joining us, Bessie. This was a fantastic episode. We dove into a lot. We're asking you a lot, but just start somewhere and start iterating. With that in mind, that is the show. We will catch you next week here live on YouTube. But while you're here, make sure that subscribe button down there is gray. Click the little button, click the little bell. We want you to be here with us every time. And shows are coming, or by the time you're watching this, because this is one of our pre-records. But by the time you're watching this, I believe there's another show on that you might want to catch with some of our good friends. So please join us every Friday. Be sure to subscribe to Pax8 Cloud on YouTube to catch all the shows, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, Bessie, for being here. Bye, y'all.
Yeah, thanks so much. Bye.